by a five-fold in total deposits. In short, the $2 billion drop in reserve must be matched by a total of $10 billion drop in demand deposits. At the end of the completed step 2, therefore, the balance sheet of the banks and of the central bank look as follows. Figure 10.3. The eventual result then of increased demand forecast by the public is a drop in demand deposits of $10 billion, resulting from the drop of bank reserve of $2 billion. The total money supply has gone down by $8 billion. For demand deposits have fallen by $10 billion, and cash in the hands of the public had risen by $2 billion, making a net drop of $8 billion in the supply of money. Thus, an increased demand for cash caused an equal drop in bank reserves, which in turn have a money multiplier effect in decreasing total demand deposits, and hence a slightly less intense effect in cutting the total amount of money. If the public's demand for cash drops, on the other hand, and it puts more of its cash in the banks, then the exact reverse happens. Suppose we begin with the situation in figure 10.1, but now the public decides to take $2 billion out of the $15 billion of central bank notes in its possession and deposits them in exchange for checking accounts. In this case, demand deposits increased by $2 billion, and the banks take the ensuing extra cash and deposit it in the central bank, increasing their reserve thereby $2 billion. The $2 billion of old central bank notes goes back into the coffers of the central bank, where they are burned or otherwise retired or liquidated. In short, the immediate result of the public depositing $2 billion of cash in the bank is that, while the total money supply remains the same, only changing the composition between demand deposits and cash, total bank reserve rise by $2 billion. Receiving the new reserve, the bank then expand credit, lending new demand deposits which they have created out of thin air. They pyramid deposits on top of the new reserve in accordance with the money multiplier, which in our stipulated case is 5/1. The final result is predicted in the balance sheet in figure 10.5. Thus, the public depositing $2 billion of cash in the banks increased reserve by the same amount. The increase in reserve enables the bank to pyramid $8 billion more of deposits by increasing loans and investment by $8 billion. Demand deposits have therefore increased by $10 billion from the reduction in the public's holding of cash. The total monthly supply has increased by $8 billion since central bank notes outstanding have dropped by $2 billion. In short, the public's holding of cash is a factor of decrease of bank reserves. That is, if the public's holding of cash increases, bank reserves immediately decrease by the same amount, whereas if the public's holding of cash falls, bank reserves immediately increase by the same amount. The movement of bank reserves is equal and inverse to the movement in the public's holding of cash. The more cash the public holds, the greater the anti-inflationary effect, and vice versa. The public's demand for cash can be affected by many factors. Loss of confidence in the banks will, of course, intensify the demand for cash to the extent of breaking the banks by bank runs. Despite the breadth and resource of the central bank, bank runs have been a powerful weapon against bank credit expansion. Only in 1933, with the establishment of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, was the government of the U.S. able to stop bank runs by putting the unlimited taxing and counterfeiting power of the federal government behind every bank deposit. Since 1933, the FDIC has insured every bank deposit, and behind the FDIC is the ability of the Federal Reserve to print money in unlimited amounts. The commercial banks in a tool are now far safer, but that is a dubious blessing indeed, for the safety means that they have lost their major incentive not to inflate. Over time, one powerful influence toward a falling demand for cash is the growth of clearing systems and devices such as credit cards. People then need to carry less cash than before. On the other hand, the growth of the underground economy in recent years, in order to avoid income taxes and other forms of government regulation, has required an increase in strictly cash transactions which do not appear on the books of any government-regulated bank. In fact, it is now customary for economists to try to gauge the extent of illegal underground transactions by estimating the increase in the proportion of cash transactions in recent years. The major movement in the public's demand for cash is seasonal. Traditionally, the public cashes in a substantial amount of demand deposits before Christmas in order to use cash for tips or presents. This have a deflationary seasonal effect on bank reserves. Then in January, the cash pours back into the bank and reserves rise once again. Generally, the Fed keeps watch on the public's demand for cash and neutralize it accordingly in ways which will be explored below. The demand for gold. As in the case of the demand for cash in the form of central bank notes, an increase in the public's demand for gold will be a factor of decrease in the lowering bank reserves, and a fall in the demand for gold will have the opposite effect. Under the gold standard with the central bank, almost all of the gold will be deposited in the central bank by the various banks, with the bank getting increased reserve in return. An increase in the public's demand for gold then will work very similarly to an increased demand for central bank notes. To obtain the gold, the public goes to the banks and draws down demand deposits, asking for gold in return. The banks must go to the central bank and buy the gold by drawing down their reserves. The increase in the public's demand for gold thus decreases bank reserve by the same amount, and will, over several months, exert a multiple deflationary effect over the amount of bank money in existence. Conversely, a decrease in the public's demand for gold will add the same amount to bank reserve and exert a multiple inflationary effect, depending on the money multiplier. Under the present fiat standard, there are no requirements that the central bank redeem in gold, or that gold outflow be tracked in order to save the banking system. But to the extent that gold is still